revisit this little talk. And for those of you who are watching the recording, want to say thank you all so much for being here. And cool. So, quick question: when you all see my screen, do you see just trauma and the paranormal, or do you see the presenter view? The little green that highlights things went away.
Alex, I see everything. I see trauma and the paranormal and the slides and the participant sidebar. Yeah, so I see it
Okay.
all.
Okay. Do you see anything that says show taskbar, display settings, and slideshow?
Yep.
Oh, you see all that. Okay. That's great. Oh, that's fantastic.
Actually, I don't see that part.
Okay, cool. Well, I just reset. So, all right, let me pull faces. There we go. Yeah, we'll just do, why aren't you showing me, little thing? All right, there we go. I guess that's better than nada. So that is so weird. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get rolling. Welcome to Trauma and the Paranormal. Thank you all so much for being here this evening. I know night before Halloween, especially for those with kids, this can get a little interesting. Um, so I appreciate you all taking time out of your Monday evening to be here. And if you're watching the recording, thank you all so much for grabbing a ticket to enjoy this webinar. This is probably one of my most requested talks when I do conventions, especially paranormal conventions, mainly paranormal conventions. I did this talk, I want to say I was telling Debbie a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago for the Rhine Research Center. I did a variation of it and it was a big hit. I ended up doing it for ASIP as well, and they really liked it. So I was like, well, maybe there's something here. So I changed it a little bit. It's evolved over the last couple years ish when I first curated the idea. So this is what it is now in its current state. It'll probably continue to evolve and change as time goes on. Um, yeah, so anytime so I think I've done this presentation 4 or 5 times now this year. So I did it at GalaxyCon Raleigh. I did it at There Is Hope Paracon. Uh, who else did I do it for? There was a bunch. Oh, oh my gosh, Sleepy Hollow Paracon. Yeah, I did it at a bunch of different Paracons, and I've had a lot of requests to do this. So I figured, I'm happy to talk about it with people. I have quite a few people who have really enjoyed this talk and they really got a lot out of it. So I'm very grateful that people are getting something out of it. I hope it can help at least inspire some change in the paranormal community, um, or at least the people that I think who should be watching this end up watching this. And I mainly mean like the big content creators, that are on YouTube and TikTok with millions of viewers and and or have TV shows. I hope they can get a chance to see this as well. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and get rolling. And just oh wow, there goes my light source when I change slides. So content disclaimer, because this topic is covering trauma, um, there may be some very uncomfortable topics coming up. So murder, assault, yeah, so probably some things that could upset or trigger somebody who's been through similar trauma, just as a heads up. All right. So just a little bit about me. I am the founder and the director of the Association of Paranormal Study. I started the team in 2011 when I was living in San Diego, California. I mainly started the team as a call to action for myself and my community. I dealt with a very disturbing case of the paranormal in 2006 after a really bad car accident. I actually wrote about the experience in my book, One Bed Over: A Hospital Haunting, and the story was also covered on haunted hospitals, and it was just recently covered on the new paranormal show, Paranormal Revenge, which is actually produced by the same company who does haunted hospitals. Um, they really liked the story, and they're like, "Hey, let's have you talk about it again." So, but at the time that I was dealing with this, there was nobody to help me. There was absolutely nobody around that was willing to help us. Um, my church, Baptist, Southern Baptist, was not willing to help. Um, and we ended up getting some help from the Greek Orthodox Church, but that more so put a muzzle on the whole thing. Um, didn't really resolve it. But this was 2006, so the paranormal community that exists today did not exist back then. It was very much a different world. The paranormal is still very much stigmatized. You didn't talk about it. You didn't talk about it with people. And because we couldn't find anyone to help us, I ended up kind of resolving it myself in such a way. But 5 years later, I graduated with my master's degree from San Diego State in theater. And I decided, okay, I got some time now. I'm going to start my team. So it was actually from a paranormally connected traumatic event that I started the team. I'm also on TikTok as the spooky stuff. I'm starting to make content again, so it's not quite a dead zone anymore. And I currently live in the DC metro area, technically Arlington, Virginia, but a lot of people don't know where Arlington is when you say Arlington, so I'm like DC. I may end up muting a couple times if I have to sneeze because I feel a sneeze coming on. But also feel free to use the chat, y'all, if you want to chat, ask questions. I'm going to take questions at the end so that, so if you want to go ahead and ask it, go ahead and ask. Otherwise, we can wait until the end. All right. And also, if you enjoy documentaries, I was just recently featured in the Tubi documentary, Scariest Places in the World. It's free. So if you want to check that out, you're more than welcome to. They mainly feature me talking about Mary King's Close, Edinburgh Castle, and Hashima Island. And the Tower of London, because I did have an experience at the Tower of London. So mainly because of Anne Boleyn. May or may not have seen Anne Boleyn's headless apparition. I saw a headless apparition. I don't know if it was Anne Boleyn or not. Or as they say in Steel Magnolias, Anne Boleyn. Any Steel Magnolia friends in the audience? Yeah, yeah. All right. A little bit of housekeeping though. I just want to make a note of moving forward, we are going to go with the intent that ghosts and spirits are valid. So we're not going to be spending the evening debating whether or not ghosts and spirits are real or if they exist. I do have to make that disclaimer because more often than not, I do usually have a skeptic in the audience who wants to argue this topic. And that's not the point of the talk. We're going to move forward with the fact that paranormal experiences are valid and that they're anomalous. If people want to do a skeptical debate with me, I welcome that at another time. Usually you got to buy me a drink and we're got to have dinner and hang out a little bit. And sometimes I do tend to use ghosts and spirits and anomaly interchangeably, but I do use those words to describe paranormal phenomena. All right, so interesting notes as I was researching this topic, I ran into some studies. Let's see. I'm trying to do this. There we go. I ran into a few studies that correlate directly paranormal experiences and the trauma that they themselves invoke. As a team, my team, Association of Paranormal Study, in the first 8-9 years, I guess up until the pandemic, so I guess 8-9 years, we were very heavily focused on residential cases, meaning we were going into people's homes. We were we were a solutions-based group. We still are in a sense, but because the social climate with paranormal beliefs has changed so much and with content creation being at an all-time high, um, we have changed the direction of our team a little bit. We'll still do residential investigations if but we heavily vet the clients. But as we were working with the public, I did notice a trend of these experiences bring about their own level of trauma. Um, and seeing a ghost, having a paranormal experience can be just as traumatic as a car accident or as being attacked or losing a loved one. And for me, I think that's something we need to pay attention to. So that's the one. So there's a the connection with trauma and the paranormal. It's not just like a Venn diagram with two circles and then you have your little shape in the middle. I think it's more like a bike chain, and you have all these links together. And I think having paranormal experiences and and how they can bring about the same traumatic response as something more real life, I think that is something we need to take into consideration. But also another link to this is also having traumatic experiences and then having a paranormal experience follow that. So let's move on. Meet baby Alex. So here's a list of my paranormal experiences, at least as I best remember them. So 1993, I had my first paranormal experience. Some of you may have heard this story. If you have, my apologies for redundancy. For those who haven't, my paranormal experience pretty much happened on like a dark and stormy night. No kidding. I was a kid who grew up in San Diego, California, as I mentioned. I would spend my summers in Kentucky, Appalachian Kentucky, in the tri-state area between Kentucky, Ohio, and West Virginia. Literally, you go across one bridge, you're in West Virginia, Canova, West Virginia, so not too far from Huntington to give you some mapping points. Go across the other bridge, you go to Ohio, so Ironton in that area. Um, so my grandmother's family is in the Catlettsburg, Ashland area. It's actually the same area where Billy Ray Cyrus is from, and yes, Billy Ray Cyrus is kin, which is a little weird to say. Sorry, there's a the this cold. The cold is the gunk is coming. Anyway, so I was in Appalachian, Kentucky during my summers, and there was a dark and stormy night. This California kid was seeing a real thunderstorm for the first time in her life. Um, I'll put it this way. My mama uh didn't really help with the whole spooky thing of it, of trying to reduce the spookiness of Appalachia. I grew up hearing the same rules, but I didn't really know what they meant at the time. If you hear your name in the woods, no, you didn't. If you hear something in the woods, no, you didn't. If you hear your mama in the woods, no, you didn't. If you see anything in the woods, no, you didn't. I was exposed to those rules very early. And again, I didn't know what they meant at the time. I'm sitting here like, yeah, and me being neurodivergent, I'm like, yeah, I did hear something in the woods. What are you talking about? Um, so my mama would always tell me, especially where she lived, she didn't live too far from the river, uh, the Ohio River. Yes, I think it's the Ohio River. Um, at night, always had to be inside after dark. Always had to be inside after dark. We would hear banging on the side of the house, and we would hear someone walking around. Now, my mama did share a property with her son, my great uncle, and I thought maybe it was one of my cousins messing with us, but I would look outside and there's no one there. And my mama would say, that's the devil trying to get in. You better pray, child. Very much like, you know, that spooky. Uh, my mama was a Free Will Baptist. So, Free Will Baptists and Pentecostals are distant cousins. If you're familiar with Pentecostals, speaking in tongues, the snakes and everything, Free Will Baptists are not too far behind. Um, so dark and stormy night, I look outside because it's like, oh, I've never seen rain like this before. And I see this hooded figure outside the house. Um, Wind was blowing like crazy, rain's blowing sideways, and the robes of this hooded figure were undisturbed, meaning like the wind's blowing, but the fabric of their clothing was not moving. I get a little weirded out, so I close the curtains. I get curious. I open the curtains back up. The figure is still out there, but even closer to my window. Close the curtains, reopen them again. I look outside. Oh, the figure is even closer. So this went on about two more times before I finally got the hint of, hey, stop opening up the curtains. And I run to bed, and the mattress I was sleeping on was a very cheap, very firm mattress. So if you were to sit on the bed doesn't sink, it tips. So I get in the bed, the mattress is tipping like this. I also shared a bed with my mama, because the way the house was, I shared a bed with my mama. And the bed tipped. So whenever the bed tipped, I knew my mama was there because I would slide down and her body would stop me from sliding off the bed. So I get into bed, worried about the hooded figure outside. The bed tips. I slide down and I'm thinking, oh, thank God Mama's here. I slide, I'm going to move my face a little bit. I slide off the bed and I look and the bed is still tilted and then it just moves like whoever was there got up. I was both intrigued and freaked out. Um, so that was 1993-ish. Because it was about a year or so after my grandpa died. So I'll get more into that in a little bit. In the year 2000, I started doing theater. I started seeing theater ghosts. I would see dancers that would be there and then gone the next moment. Um, 2004, I had a really bad sleep paralysis incident. 2005, 2006, that car accident I told you about on New Year's Eve, 2005 going to 2006, that led to my spirit attachment for 8 months. That was around them. So I had an out of body experience with that whole thing. I also had visual manifestations, meaning I could see the apparition, and I also had psychokinetic activity, meaning things were moving. And then 2009, I was seeing, still seeing ghosts in theaters. It's like, oh, hey, there's a person there. No, there isn't. So you see all these dates here. See all these dates here. I want to show you something. So here we could see I have a significant life experience occur, and then I had a paranormal experience after that. So 1992, my grandpa died. 1993, I had my first paranormal experience. My grandpa was like my father. He played a significant role in my early childhood. I adored that man. Losing him was very devastating. So, traumatic event, paranormal experience. 8 years later, 2000, my grandma dies. I start seeing theater ghosts. In 2004, I was assaulted. I started having sleep paralysis incidences. 2005, 2006, the car accident happened. I'll go into more about the car accident in a minute. Then that happened. 2009, I moved out of the house. If you knew my mother, it was a traumatic experience leaving the house. Um, she was not somebody who was eager to let her adult daughter go. Um, there was a lot of drama with me leaving. There was a lot of drama and a lot of trauma, drama and trauma with leaving. Um, to the point where my mom would demand I come home, and if I didn't, she would call the cops on me, which sucked. Um, and then, of course, in 2015, my mom passed away, which also is traumatic. And I started having more present paranormal experiences. I also started becoming way more accepting of the paranormal and literally welcoming ghosts into my home. So, all right, I'm going to move on to the car accident. So, the car accident, and I'll come to a point about this too. 2005, New Year's Eve, it was raining in San Diego. You probably heard me mention earlier, Southern California kid looking at a rainstorm. I had never seen real rain before. Anytime it rains in Southern California, people lose their minds. As a former San Diegan, I can attest to this. I was on my way to a New Year's Eve party, and as I got on the freeway ramp, my car hydroplaned. So my car hydroplanes, I get out of the car, somebody stops and says, "Hey, are you okay?" I actually had this person call my mom for me because I was so terrified of what my mom was going to say. Um, and then another guy stops his car and he says, "Hey, do you want me to direct traffic?" Sure. So he's directing traffic. A couple of other people stop to check on me. I will say, San Diegans, Southern Californians, it is kind of like people, we take care of each other. So it was nice. I was in a show at the time and I realized all my costumes were in the car and I was going to have to get my costumes out of the car. So I'm getting ready to open my door to get my costumes because they were going to have to tow my car. Had to get my costumes. I hear the guy directing traffic yell, "Watch out." I turn around, another car comes, hits me. I flip onto the hood of the car. I roll off the hood of the car and I fall 25 feet over the guardrail onto the road below. And thus started an evening of a very spirited night, as I call it. So needless to say, I had to go to the hospital. You survive a 25-foot fall landing on pavement. It just so happened during that time that it was a red light at the intersection where the road was. Um, so, because it could have been much worse. I could have landed on a car. I could have, I mean, I always think of like the 40 different ways that this could have been much worse. Um, so I had several broken bones. I broke 3 vertebrae in my back, shattered my tailbone, and I vertically sheared my pelvis. And I also had significant internal trauma, meaning there was a lot of internal bleeding happening. So they could not give me pain meds because my blood pressure was way too low, which felt amazing when they moved me off the gurney. Or they moved me off the road onto the gurney into the ambulance. I felt every bump in the road. I was conscious throughout this whole thing, by the way. And then when they moved me from the gurney into the bed in the trauma room, yeah, I felt every moment of that. Um, and it hurt. They were working on me. They were trying to essentially keep me alive. The pain was significant, and it got so bad where I actually blacked out. Well, I think I blacked out. It's one of those things where I closed my eyes and all of a sudden, oh, hey, I'm floating above my body. And then, oh, hey, I'm standing at the foot of the bed watching the doctors work on me. But before that happened, uh, so I mentioned it was raining. San Diego on New Year's Eve night in the rain, hospitals were packed. So it was so bad that we were actually sharing trauma rooms. That's how bad it was. And there was actually a gentleman next to me who was also not in great shape, but he was in much worse shape than I was. He was bleeding all over the floor. I saw that. The nurse saw me looking at him and she put a divider between us, but I could still see all the blood. So, back to my out of body experience, I'm watching the doctors work on me. I could actually walk around too. And I some people have said it was a near death experience. I didn't see a light, nor did I get that loving, warm feeling you're supposed to get like when you die, like, oh, you're just so full of love. And I that was not mine at all. I could walk around and I even walked into the lobby of the hospital, of the ER, and I could see my mom with all my friends there. And then of course part of me thought, oh, well, this must mean I'm going to die because here's everybody that I love and care about. But I found myself back into the trauma room, standing at the foot of the bed, watching the doctors work on me. I look over and I also see a man standing at the foot of the bed next to me. And he's wearing all leather, like he's a motorcycle rider. He looks at me, I look at him. Then it feels like I'm going down a roller coaster and I'm back in my body. And this candy striper, it was a male candy striper. His name was Joe Apple. I'll never forget his name. He was cleaning the blood off of my face. And I look at the clock and it's after midnight. He looks at me looking at the clock and he tells me Happy New Year. So, um, I had to get MR. I think it was an MRI I had to get afterwards. It was an MRI or a CAT scan. Might have been an MRI because there was clearly broken bones, but they didn't know which ones at the time. So I get my MRI. The shock starts to kick in, and I get really cold, and I start shaking and everything, which is so fun. I get up to my room, and I get up to my room and I start seeing a shadow kind of looming around my room. And as I'm trying to get like a look at the shape, it starts to take the form of a person, but I can't really tell what kind of person. California Highway Patrol and San Diego Police Department come to see me, but in this case, first was California Highway Patrol. So my hydroplaning accident and the hitting where I got hit by a car happened on a freeway ramp. So that was California Highway Patrol. When I fell and landed onto the street below, that became San Diego Police Department's jurisdiction. So CHP Chips was coming to talk to me about the woman that hit me. Um, they were trying to basically say that I was drunk and I fell off the guardrail myself because the woman said that she didn't hit me. I tripped and fell off the guardrail. Um, and their line of questioning was quite aggressive, and I got upset. When I started getting upset, the shadow figure actually manifested into the man who was in the room next to me. 19-year-old Alex is thinking, oh, he's here to visit me. But he starts yelling at the CHP officers. They don't acknowledge his presence. And I thought maybe it was a cop tactic. Yeah. But anyway, long story short, I started seeing this man in my room, but nobody else could see him. And the next morning, my mom comes to see me in the hospital. She really wants to brush my hair, which is what this picture is from. Because there was another person in the room with us after this incident happened. She wanted to brush my hair. She gets out the hairbrush. She lays it on my tray. She tries to pick up the brush, and it does like this little hop. We look at each other. She tries to get the brush again. It hops, and then it does this full slide off the tray and knocks over my cup of water. My mom was one of those people, she did not like to acknowledge things. So she she just grabs the brush and just pretends nothing's wrong. And I'm sitting there looking at the spilled cup of water. My friend comes into the room, takes a picture of us because she's thinking, oh, sweet mother-daughter moment after a devastating car accident. I'm looking at that cup of water and I'm just thinking, okay, no one's going to acknowledge this. Um, I ended up having my most intense dream about this guy, who I ended up calling the man in the leather jacket, while I was under anesthesia, which is that's not how anesthesia works. You're under anesthesia, that's it. You're out. It's like blinking. No, I had a full out dream about this guy. I ended up changing hospitals because my level of care changed. He followed me to the hospital. And this guy's apparition, this guy's spirit ended up sticking around me for 8 months. Eventually got resolved. But that was 2006. When I told this story, it was about 15 years later. This was a story that I didn't really talk about with people, or if I did, it was very select few people. I shared my story with a mutual friend who had connections with haunted hospitals, and they gave my name to the production company behind haunted hospitals, and they're like, "Hey, we hear you have a really compelling story." I hadn't really talked about it. I mean, when you deal with a spirit attachment for that long, you kind of still worry sometimes if you talk about it, will he come back? Um, so the production company with haunted hospitals was fantastic. I went down to Atlanta, talked about my story, sat in a chair for about 3 hours. Just saw a shadow. Awesome. And that was nice. But then after the episode came out, I decided to put out a book right after just to kind of have the full story about it, because I knew that the TV show could only cover so much. Because my segment was only about 20 minutes, so I knew they were only going to be able to cover so much. So, um, but I started getting interview requests to be on podcasts, and I had to tell this story over and over and over again. I think there was one week I was telling the story at least twice a day. And excuse me, my PTSD actually came back. I started having night terrors again. I started getting incredible anxiety. And yeah, it just wasn't a good time. Especially when you haven't really, I realized too that at this time that I hadn't really coped with the full effects of the car accident. I actually didn't start going to, I didn't go to therapy. Especially when you grow up in a household and in a culture where it's like, suck it up, you survived, you should be grateful to be alive, move on, you know? Um, there was a lot of unresolved feelings with it, but I realized having to tell my own story over and over and over and over again, the light bulb kind of went on, and I went, holy crap, this is what we put spirits through at paranormal investigations, especially at the more popular locations like Trans-Allegheny, Waverly Hills, Trivet Clinic. You have you put spirits through this. We put spirits through this on an almost daily basis, especially with the rise of like TV shows, content creators, where the talking points is usually trauma. It's usually trauma, talking about traumatic experiences. And it was kind of a much delayed realization, but a realization nonetheless. But So it made me realize that, hey, we need to really maybe reconsider the way that we approach investigating. Um, so, but before we can really dive into that, let's talk about why paranormal investigating is so popular in the first place. Um, I think paranormal becomes very popular for a few reasons. People want to know exactly, how do paranormal experiences work? How do they happen? Why do they happen? Um, what is it like when they happen? People want to have some sort of experience with something that they're not familiar with. They want to encounter something that maybe they can't explain. Um, or they had an experience and it happened and then it was over in um like in less time than what you would think, and they want to try to find explanations for why this happened to them. And a whole other reason could be they're looking for experience, for answers and validation, for just in general, like, why does every town have a woman in white story? Why is there a crybaby lane in every town? um or why did my sister see a ghost but not me? So, but there's another reason. There's another reason too. Um, there's also this layer of processing trauma, using ghost hunting as processing trauma. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Colin Dickey, the author, but he wrote a really fascinating book called Ghostland. And it really goes into more dark tourism, but paranormal haunted places is a major presence here. Um, and he makes the claim, which I agree with, that we use ghost stories as a way to process trauma of our past, especially around the history of enslaved people, that sort of thing. And it seems that maybe ghost stories presents a little bit of a buffer to help make it less intense or lessen the sting a little bit. But what we need to do as paranormal investigators is we need to dive deeper beyond the ghost stories and look at that relationship between the ghost stories and the history. Because I think somewhere in those layers, we can actually find the answer as to why we're so fascinated with not just ghost stories, but also the paranormal. Like, why do we want to go into haunted asylums? Um, why is Salem so popular to visit, besides the whole witchy theme of it? Because as far as we know, like with Salem, none of the people who were executed or jailed for witchcraft were actually witches. Um, there was a whole deeper political aspect of it. So I think we need to understand that side of why we dive into the paranormal in order to fully understand it. All right, let's keep going. Let's talk about current investigation methods. A lot of this is stuff that I have noticed, not just on TV, but also what I've seen um, when I join in on other investigations. The past couple years, I've been trying to not lead investigations because about. I want to learn more about um, how other people investigate. How do they run group investigations and all that good stuff? All these poor people watching the recordings giving me rubbing my nose with Kleenex. So we hear this very often. Give us a sign of your presence. Uh, you know, I am not the biggest fan of those of like command statements as much as possible. I find that when we demand ghosts to do things, it kind of lessens them. It lessens their humanity. And there's also this thing of othering of spirits, meaning that we're treating them a bit less than a human. And when I say we, I mean the whole collective culture. I'm not saying anyone here on this in this call right now, but we tend to use them to make lights go off, for cheap thrills, for spooky factor. Gotta say spooky factor. Um, and also this, and as I mentioned earlier, um, discussing traumatic events to get a response. Um, do you know that you're dead? Do you know how you died? Tell me how you lost your family to the plague. Um, did you die during the Civil War? Were you a soldier? Did you fight? Let's see, what's another? Um, what was it like giving birth? Just using, or what was it like to be attacked, or were you attacked? Um, Tell me about what your abuser did to you. I actually heard this. I heard a investigator say this. So or saying, um, I heard this when I was watching a live video of an investigator at the Gettysburg Orphanage, trying to talk to the kids and trying to get the kids to respond. If you don't respond, I'm going to get Rosa. Rosa was the woman, the caretaker who abused the children. It's like if you don't cooperate, I'm going to go get your abuser. Um, or even going to locations of intense trauma. It seems that every location has to be scarier and scarier and scarier and more horrifying. I mean, the Hotel Cecil in Los Angeles, where Elisa Lam died, plantations, asylums. Um, I mean, there's people even trying to get into Auschwitz. Um, People, so it's like going to these locations where horrific things occurred. Um, God, what's the lake in Las Vegas? Ghost Adventures just did an episode over there where several people drowned. Many of those families are still around, and they weren't happy about that episode. But locations of intense trauma, that's a big one. Um, and a lot of our modern paranormal investigation methods, whether it's TikTok, YouTube, even when I'm working with newer investigators, a lot of them are getting their ideas and concepts of investigating from television. They're getting them from television. And so we have this situation where we have TV forming the investigation method. Um, it is shaping the paranormal experience. Um, and people are going to places that are highly trafficked. Waverly Hills, Trans Allegheny, uh, Myrtle's Plantation. Myrtle's Plantation is a fascinating one for me because the one of the main spirits there, Chloe, more than likely did not exist. But yet there's this whole ghost lore around Chloe. Um, but Chloe has been featured on TV. Chloe is a major talking point for Myrtle's Plantation. So you have a situation where TV is kind of dictating modern paranormal investigation methods. All right. So as we go into this, I want to take a moment to talk about empathy and what empathy is. I think the paranormal investigation culture, we go through a couple forms of empathy. So there's sympathy and then we have empathy. I really try to drive a more empathetic approach to investigating. Um, Sometimes it's kind of hard to get buy-in, especially from my more skeptical members, but I say, hey, even if you don't believe in it, just respect it. Um, So you have cognitive empathy. So that's knowing how the other person feels. Cognitive empathy isn't always well received, though, especially if you say, I know how you feel. Like if you talk to somebody who lost their mother and you say, I know how you feel, but you haven't lost your mother, you do not know how that person feels. Also, your relationship with your mother may be very different from that other person. So I tend to stay away from cognitive empathy as much as possible. Emotional empathy, feeling the other person's emotions. My empaths here, you probably feel this one a lot. Um, Compassionate empathy. Not only do you understand and feel that person's feelings, but you're also wanting to help. I think compassionate empathy is what a lot of paranormal investigators feel and do because, it's like you want to help, you want to try to understand what that person has gone through. Hey, how can we help? All right. But not every investigator is aligned with this. So I've as I've observed different investigators working, I mentioned I have a degree in theater. I'm very fascinated with the concept of performance and what we feel empowered to do, um, depending on the space or the venue. Um, I've noticed with a lot of investigators who provoke, they have a sense of bravery that I think would not exist if they could see the person that they're speaking to. Um, they can say things that they cannot say to the living. because they cannot see the face or the emotions of the person they are speaking to. Um, meaning they can't see the spirit that they're talking to and provoking. Um, and when you can't see the consequences or there's no immediate repercussions for your actions, then that activity can escalate quite a bit. So bringing up inappropriate topics like, hey, if you don't respond to me, I'm going to get Rosa to come put you in your place. Like you're really going to use an abuser as your provocation topic to get a child spirit to talk. There was one line that I heard one time that was said by a ghost hunter. They weren't getting a response from the spirits, and they said, "There's no reason to not talk to us." That, even if you're having a pleasant interaction with somebody, but they're not responding, imagine saying that to somebody who didn't feel like talking to you. Hey, there's no reason to not talk to me. Um, yeah, yeah, um, yeah. There's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack there. But also, there's this whole expectation to perform on cue. There's an expectation to perform on cue with the paranormal. And I get it. You spend all this money to go to a location. I'm going to move my talking head over here. There's um you spend a lot of money to go to these places. So I guess there is an expectation to make it your money's worth, which I think falls into a tricky line with ghost tourism that it's a whole other lecture for another time. But yeah, but with these actions, could this be why sometimes we get silence? Besides the idea that the location is not haunted, but could this be why we get silence sometimes? Could this be why we get aggressive responses from spirits, especially when they say, "Get out"? Um, I mean, I would want you out too. Or could this also be the reason why we get, investigators get scratches, they get physically assaulted? Um, it's not a good time. It's not a good time. So now, so like I mentioned with my team, we really try to advocate having empathy towards the spirits regardless. So whether they believe that they're real or not, you're still going to approach the space with respect and treat the space respectfully. Um, we want to try to keep the conversations to being polite versus causing more harm. And this can be tricky depending on the location, but we also try to avoid questions relating to trauma, meaning we're not going to use trauma as a talking point. We'll let the spirits bring it up with us if they really feel comfortable with us, because we truly believe that these spirits and even us are more than performers for good data. Um, and even like the people who are still alive today and looking at our evidence, they deserve more than just really bad audio and video files and blinking lights. I think we have an opportunity to make deeper connections with spirits. And with the way the media is portraying investigations, I don't think that's going to get us any closer. All right. So, on that note, I'm going to get into the case studies. So, I'm going to get into the good stuff, and y'all will need to let me know if hopefully, the video files work. Why should we avoid trauma? Um, because it helps us earn trust with the spirits. A lot of times when we go to these locations, we're only there for a short amount of time, which means we have to earn trust pretty quickly. Um, a lot of times, I think there's an expectation to have these spirits trauma dump on us or share their stories when they barely know us and know who we are. Um, we also use an approach of using more generic questions if possible because we really want to try to avoid bias. Like just because we go to the USS North Carolina, it doesn't mean that the spirits we interact with are going to be the sailors from World War II who died from the torpedo. Because yeah, we want to try to avoid that. We don't want to taint people. We don't want to go in there just assuming everybody that we interact with, you know, is from that era. Um, and we also want to strive to have a genuine connection with spirits. And then other times what we'll do is we'll just say nothing at all and we'll just take in the space and hang out in the space and see what happens. Which sometimes makes sense because especially when we do residential cases, when our clients have experiences, they're not ghost hunting. They're doing just regular things. They're folding laundry, they're working, they're watching TV. So we'll actually try to emulate just a regular day at the house and see what happens. But in case you want to try using a non-trauma approach to investigating, there's a couple topics you can explore, like what makes them happy? What does the space look like to them? Um, what's their favorite food, favorite color? Were they in love? Did they have children? So these points are, but it's like when you first meet somebody. Oh, where do you work? Oh, do you have kids? Are you married? Um, what's your favorite movie? Or hey, what kind of music do you like? Um, what do you do for fun? It's those questions you would ask somebody when you first meet them. Especially on like what makes them happy, you know, what makes them happy. And on that, I'm going to present the first use case with this. This location, I wrote a book about this place, the Trivett Clinic. Um, Trivett Clinic was built in 1932 in Hamptonville, North Carolina, by Dr. William Amos Trivett. Trivett, I say both. Um, and depending who you talk to in the town, it's going to be either or. Um, the doctor's wife was named Gwendolyn. Now, Gwen and Dr. Trivett both grew up in the area. I think maybe one county apart from each other. When they got married, they actually moved up north. But then Dr. Trivett's parents weren't doing so great, so he actually came back down to help take care of them. And Gwendolyn at the time was really trying to become a professional singer, mainly in opera. She had a passion for singing. When I was looking up all the newspaper articles about her, it was always her singing in church. She loved to sing. She really wanted to take that stage, but um, I empathize with Gwen quite a bit because, as I mentioned, I have a master's in theater. I'm not doing theater now. I mean, I did pre-pandemic, but I wasn't working professionally. I'm not on Broadway. So I kind of felt like I could relate to her on like, the whole broken dreams aspect. Um, so I really wanted to play opera for her. And our first well, I want to say it was more of our second or third investigation. Um, one of my mediums picked up on an adult woman in the basement with us. And when I asked if it was, and she gave like a G name, and I was like, could this be Gwendolyn? All of our equipment, one of our pieces of equipment started going off. So I decided to play Musetta's Waltz from La Boheme. And when La Boheme started playing, all of our equipment started going off. K2 meters, REM pods, all going off, all lighting up. Being the skeptic, I wanted to see like, okay, is it just like the music that's causing everything to go off? I played Van Halen afterwards. Nothing went off. So I'm like, okay. So every time I've gone to the Trivia Clinic, I try to play music for Gwendolyn. During one of my last visits there, we played opera again. So a couple things I want to go over before I start playing this clip. Uh, you're going to see that you probably see there's a lantern shaped device on the stairs. That is a REM pod. And then that shiny thing to the right of it, that is a flashlight. Now, the location is very passionate about using a mag light flashlight for spirit interaction. I'm kind of on the fence about mag lights because I know that, with when you loosen them, it kind of can be either or. But sometimes we have gotten intelligent responses with the mag lights. So I'm like, I will I'll entertain it. So the floor there is concrete. The floors are wood. Um, so I will play for you Musetta's Waltz. This video, you should be able to hear music. If I'll play it once. If you don't hear the music, let me know in the chat. If you do, awesome. Um, and I want you to, if you have headphones, put on headphones. Um, yeah, let's give this a try. Did you all hear the sound? All right, I'll play it again too. Good. I'm glad people hear sound. That's good. All right, I'll play it again. All right. So the moment you see the flashlight go off, because of the context, I'll just tell you. So you hear a voice, kind of go a huh, huh. Let me see if can I rewind this? Oh yes, I can. Oh wait, maybe I can't. There we go. Okay. No, I can't. Okay. Guess we're gonna listen one more time. So when the flashlight goes off, you're gonna hear a huh, huh. Um, here we go. Yeah. So this was something where, we took something that we knew one of the spirits liked and we played it. We used music as a trigger object for them. And we caught that sound on two different devices. So on the post of the stairs, there is a audio recorder too, and we caught it on there. Actually, no, we caught it on three devices. We caught it on two camcorders and an audio recorder. Um, yeah, so we thought that was pretty cool. She's so we don't know if it was Gwendolyn that was responding to that. Somebody liked the music. I'd like to think it was Gwendolyn because, we were playing it for her, but um, you know, we had something happen here. So this is a really good example of how you can still get spirit interaction without having to, say things like, "Did you know that you're dead?" That kind of thing. All right, introducing the next use case. So other things you could talk about is like movies, books, music, college sports. Um, One of my favorite examples of college sports actually comes from Rosedale Plantation uh, in Charlotte, North Carolina. The team that investigates there, Charlotte Area Paranormal Society, they have a team member who's a docent. Actually, they got three team members who work there, and one of the spirits there is very invested in Chapel Hill's basketball team, because I guess the spirit had gone to UNC Chapel Hill when they were alive, or they helped found the university. It was one of those, like, they had a connection there. But yeah, one of the team members of Charlotte Area Paranormal Society will go in there and they will update the spirit on how UNC Chapel Hill's basketball team is doing. And apparently they do get active spirit interaction, which I find that to be fascinating. So again, you don't have to talk about trauma to get a response. You can just talk about sports. It's wild. But that's not the use case I was going to use. This is where that disclaimer comes into play. So Whitney, you might know this location. So this is the cabin on 360, more specifically the Elliott House, in Mechanicsville, Virginia. It is about 30-ish minutes outside of Richmond. Um, and so there's two buildings on the property. There's a model cabin. I think it was built in the 70s or 80s. And then there is a house, again, built around the 60s or 70s. The house there used to be the home to the Elliott family. And the daughter, Melissa Carol Elliott, lived there with her mother, her father, and her half brother. Her half brother was from her previous relationship that her mother had. Her half brother murdered and raped and murdered Melissa. Um, terrible, terrible situation. I've had some people tell me that he stuffed her body in a refrigerator. I've had other people, but most of my sources are like she was put out in the woods. Her body was left in the woods. Either way, horrific death. Um, Today, if you go visit the Elliott house, Ryan, who is It's either the owner or related to the owner or owner adjacent. Um, he will tell you, and actually Dennis too, who does help out, who also works at the house too, or works at the property, will tell you that many people believe that there's a demonic or an evil spirit in the Elliott house. I will say when I went into the house, I did get some spooky ooky feelings. But I think that may have been because I knew what happened there. Um, and a lot of investigators, when they go to the Elliott house, they tend to hyper focus on the evil entity, especially in the basement. We went into Melissa's room, and we didn't want to talk about what happened to Melissa. We wanted to see one. I was really hoping Melissa was not there for one, because I'm like, oh my lord, I hope she moved on and she's not coming back to this place. I no. But in the event that she was there, I wanted to make sure it was a pleasant experience for her to talk to us. Now, my male investigators were trying to talk to her. She was not answering. Um, but when I asked questions, there was some sort of answer. There was an interaction happening. There was intelligent responses on the Phasma box and the REM pod and our K2 meter. So I decided, okay, I'm going to use this opportunity to let's talk. Let's think about what would a teenage girl from the 70s want to talk about. So I switched the conversation to Donny Osmond, Sean Cassidy, David Cassidy, um, the pop stars of the time and magazines, because I think Bop magazines was very well established in the 70s. So started talking to her about boys and fashion and all this really good stuff. And this really weird thing happened. Of course, we weren't taking video of this. Um, So I don't know how many of you have seen Touched by an Angel back when it was on, but you know that you remember if you did, you remember every time the angels revealed themselves, like this backlight would appear. It's like I'm an angel of the Lord. Ping. This backlight would show up. So that kind of happened to me. Like this backlight showed up behind me, and initially Ted, who's like the skeptic on our team, he was like, "Oh, it was your Fitbit," and I'm like, "Okay, one, my Fitbit would be in front of me. This was behind me." But it was just really weird to see this light show up on me. And and then after the light went off, it kind of got a little creepy. Ted and Jason, my team members, had this agreement that if they started to feel uncomfortable, they would leave the house, and then we would only visit the house in 30-minute increments. I was not a huge fan of that rule, but I can respect why they had it. But anyway, they got spooked and we all left the house. But I'd like to think that maybe we made a connection with Melissa there and maybe we gave her a break from talking about her trauma. All right, here's another use case. This one's a little embarrassing for me because this was a very cringe-worthy interaction, but I was at Hillview Manor at Hillcon. That was the other place I did this lecture, Hillcon. I was at Hillview Manor in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. This is a great example of how small talk can still really produce some positive interactions. I was in a room on the second or third floor. It used to be the lunchroom of Hillview Manor. Hillview Manor went through a couple iterations as like a hospital, asylum, prison, halfway house, that kind of thing. It was a lunchroom and then it became the hair salon. Like they actually have the basins still there. And they take pride in the fact that there's still hair in the basins from when it was being used as a hair cuttery. I think that's a little gross, but it's fine. But I was making small talk, and that REM pod that y'all saw in the Trivia Clinic video, I was actually using it in here. This thing is sensitive. Like you literally have to touch it to make it go off. So I'm going to show you a video of my really bad small talk um, at Hillview Manor, and you're going to see what's going to happen. Here we go.
Hello. How are you this evening? Okay. Hi. Would you like me to cut your hair? I can't say that I know how to cut hair. Okay. I'm just going to back slowly away from this just in case it's me. Okay. My name is Alex. What's your name? Okay. Interesting. I came a long ways away to investigate, to talk to you and hear your story. Just doing a test. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me know that you're here.
All right. So you can see in this one, it's very cringy small talk, but you can see too, I also back away to make sure that it's not me setting off the REM pod. Um, you know, and you could hear some things on the spirit box I was running too. I try not to tell people what to hear, but it's kind of interesting to hear some of the things coming through. But the REM pod interaction was what really stood out to me. The fact that it was lighting up, and it did not do that again for the rest of the evening. If it did do that again for the rest of the evening, then I was gonna get my REM pod checked for, is there something glitching? But yeah, in this case, not quite. Oop, don't want to play that again. All right, this next one, next one. So, um, another thing that I recommend when you go into a haunted location is talk about you. Share your story, because you may reveal parts about yourself that a spirit may find relatable. The spirit may find some common ground with you and can relate to you. Um, so usually I'll say something like, "My name is Alex. I'm originally from California, live in Arlington. I'm married. Um, I'm also, queer, men, women, genders, other genders I'm into, it's, I love everybody regardless of who you are, what you look like. I have cats. I love to read. My favorite food is noodles, things like that. Just kind of sharing whatever I can about who I am. And sometimes that opens doors. Sometimes that opens doors for a spirit to say, "Oh, hey, I like cats too," or "Hey, I also used to live in California," or "I have an uncle that lived in California." Weird things like that can create some connections and make a spirit more comfortable to talk about you. I mean, we go into these haunted spaces and we're always asking the spirits to tell us their story, but very seldom do they hear our story. So, um, so this case, and I think this is the last use case, um, the battleship North Carolina. My team's actually going there in a couple weeks. I will not be going because life, but we've been there a couple times. The first time we went, we dressed in period clothing, and we brought um, we brought cigarettes and booze, because that's a good way that you can get the spirits to talk, is sailors. Bring in pictures of pinups, women dressed in scantily clothing. Bring some whiskey and some cigarettes. You can get them to chat. Um, the night that we dressed up, uh, we actually had a lot of flirtatious behavior, but it's because we approached the spirits as like, "Hey, who wants to take us out on a date?" Because we were an all-female team at the time, and they did not want to talk about the war with us. This was really before we really advocated the trauma-free method. Maybe that's what it's called. But they didn't want to talk about the war with us, so we respected that. And yeah, they were very flirtatious, and one of my team members even had her skirt flipped up. you know. Um, so the second time we went there, we did not dress up. Um, I was interested in doing more, like being more of a paranormal investigator this time around. Um, and one of our psychic mediums was doing her walkthrough, and when she was in the enlisted quarters, she had this vision of a sailor in a fetal position in the bathroom, in the showers, and she got the impression that this spirit was queer. And we're like, okay, noted. We tend to not go in the direction of what a medium says with their readings, because then that kind of that goes in with the bias, and then it kind of dictates our investigation, which sometimes we don't want that to happen. But so when Jason, Ted, and I were in the enlisted quarters, um, we were doing the Estes method. You know, I was under, so I had the headphones on, the noise canceling headphones, the spirit box running, and I was blindfolded. Um, I was about 5, 10 feet away from Jason and Ted, and they were doing their line of questioning, and I'm only going to play about 3.5 minutes of this conversation. It was actually more of a 15, 20 minute conversation. On my end, it sounded like word salad, but on their end, it made sense. And when I was listening back to the audio, I could actually hear the full conversation. But it came out that the spirit that they were talking to, or whoever they were talking to, was also queer. But given that they were queer in the 40s, more than likely, they did not have the same freedoms or privileges that, Jason and Ted would have today. Jason and Ted are both gay men, not married to each other, married to other men. Um, so this conversation was very much a trying to understand how times have changed and the impact that this sailor may have made for Ted and Jason's future. So I'm going to go ahead and play the audio for this. I'm going to turn off my camera because it's a long time for 3 minutes for y'all to look at my face. This is audio only. You don't have to worry about watching video. But I think the conversation you're about to hear is a beautiful example of using empathy during an investigation and empowering that spirit to make their own choices and move forward. All right, so I'm going to turn off my camera and let's go ahead and listen to this audio.
No matter who has told you that. So be yourself and have pride in who you love.
Lucky.
We are. We're very lucky. And it was because of the battles that you will have to go through that we are able to be ourselves. So thank you for that. Because of your struggles, my generation is able to love freely. And I'm the happiest man that I could ever have been being married to my husband. So thank you for that.
Jealousy?
Yeah.
We get it.
We understand. We're not going to say it's easy. There's still people that, try their best to keep us down. Still people who throw things at us in public.
Still get called names.
All the time.
Like me.
And I'm sorry you have to go through that.
Yeah. But hopefully that you're not alone in this time.
And those
Sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Those of you who are struggling, it's okay. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be confused. But be strong and have pride in who you are. Have pride in your struggle. Your struggle is going to teach you a lot. It's going to teach you a lot about yourself. And it'll teach you about a lot of people around you. You find out very quickly who really loves you.
Won't accept me.
I know that it's a product of the time. And if I could do something to change it for you, I would in a heartbeat. But know, and I said this in my meditation, that I accept you, and I love you for who you are, and I am thankful for you.
I accept you. I love you for who you are. And I am thankful for you because you have helped
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. And thank you.
Okay.
All right. So, yeah, so here we see this is a really great example of utilizing empathy during an investigation. And like I said, this was word salad to me on my end. I know, Whitney. It's so Jason and Sean took me Jason and Sean. Jason and Ted, Sean is Jason's husband. Jason and Ted brought me out of the Estes after that, and they were just both sobbing. This was an emotional interaction for them for sure. And but yeah, we have all the elements there: empathy, relating, making a connection with the spirit. So, and I like to close this presentation with that. Keep people in mind, keep experiences in mind, keep the context in mind, and exercise self-awareness on investigations. We're there to make an impact positive. We want to try to not cause harm to any location that we visit. We don't want to cause more harm to spirits. And yeah, we want to be there and make a positive impact as much as possible. Um, so I'll go ahead and pause right now. Any questions, any comments?
Girl, I got too many.
Awesome.
We need to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man.
Cool. Nice. All right. So Whitney and I will chat offline. um, yeah, and in case anyone's typing or anything, and don't feel like you have to ask questions right now or share any comments. Definitely this can be something that happens separately if you want to message me or email me, because this is a lot. This is a lot to absorb. Um, it's a lot to process for a lot of people. And it definitely brings awareness to an element of what we do in the paranormal. Um, I know now for me, uh, I'm very hyper aware of what I do and what I ask. Um, it is, Whitney. It's a lot to absorb, but it's also important. That's very true. Um, One of the questions I do get, thinking of an FAQ in my head, one of the questions I do get a lot is, how do you handle battlefields? That is a question I do get a lot. Um, and for me, especially because I go to Gettysburg. I'm working on it. I go to Gettysburg a lot. It's one of my favorite locations. Uh, I try to avoid trauma because I think the battle itself makes us all have a bias that any spirit we interact with has to be from the battle, has to be from the Civil War. No, one of the more present spirits in Gettysburg is Debbie Harmon, who died in the 80s. And I have a kitten trying to walk on my keyboard. Can you say hi, Toto? Can you say hi, Toto? Can you say hi, Toto butt? Yeah? Mwah. Interrupting me. Yes, you are. You're just interrupting me. Yeah? Yeah, okay. She likes to walk on my keyboard. I don't know where she learned that, but probably from one of the several other kitties. But anyway, so Debbie Harmon was murdered in her apartment in the 80s in Gettysburg, and she's a very prominent spirit in the area from the 80s. One of my more impactful experiences at the Jenny Wade house wasn't talking about Jenny Wade, and Jenny Wade was the only civilian casualty during the Battle of Gettysburg. Um, uh, one of the more intense experiences I had at the Jenny Wade house was an apple pie recipe. We were using Phasma and the ingredients for an apple pie recipe started coming through the Phasma and I'm sitting here like, okay, Cool. The orphanage is a bit of a different story. With the orphanage, it's the presence of a lot of child spirits. So I really try to like sing songs, read stories, play music. Sometimes whatever negative entity is down there tends to make an appearance regardless. Um, but again, we try not to exercise trauma when we go into any of these buildings. Now, if the war comes through, we'll go off from there, but we don't bring it up, if that makes sense. I mean, the town of Gettysburg went through incredible trauma right after the battle. It took years for it to recover. So it can get tricky with battlefields, but it's not impossible. You may have to be very broad and generic with your questions. Um, let's see. Ah, I'm doing multi-screens here. Whitney, oh, Debbie, I feel so validated. This is how I approach investigations. Often my team laugh at me while I'm sitting on the floor talking about knitting or playing music or reading old books. Honestly, to me, I feel like we get more experiences when we approach the paranormal this way. With normal interactions, just doing everyday things. The average human doesn't go through trauma every day. Um, I mean, gosh, when I become a ghost, I would hope that I'm not being asked about my car accident every day. Talk to me about cats. I'd love to talk about cats. I will move any device, make anything beep for you if you bring up cats. Bring a cat. Whitney says, I also feel the same way, Debbie. I feel like I get laughed at because sometimes when investigators whip out trigger objects, I get a visceral reaction to it from a spirit that they don't like it. Yeah, that's a good point, Whitney. Sometimes you could just feel the tension in the air when a spirit is not appreciative, um, not liking like a method or a tool that's being used.
I'll have
Um,
to tell you about that off camera sometime because it involves someone with some things that we know. But
mm,
I did have a question for you,
yeah,
Alex.
yeah.
What happens when the paranormal activity or the paranormal experience is traumatizing? How
Mm.
do you handle that in the moment?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, it depends on a few things. Um, would like an example would be like maybe somebody gets grabbed or there's a visual manifestation, that kind of traumatic experience or assault.
Yeah,
Okay,
all of the above.
all of the above. Um, yeah, usually when that happens, I will do a check with the main group, parties who have experienced it and ask them like, how you doing? How you doing? May have to do a check with myself too, especially if I saw it. How am I doing? Usually when that happens, we pause, we take a break, and we may go outside. We may move to another part of the building. Um, but it really just depends on how the experiencers are reacting to it. If it's a situation, usually it's a situation where people have to take a break, then yeah, we do take a break. But sometimes if our wits are still about us and I'm like, can you keep going? Yeah, I can keep going. Okay, let's follow up with this. Why did this just happen? A lot of times we will ask why. Because a lot of times, sometimes, and this is all ghost theory. I can't prove any of it exists. Maybe the spirit doesn't know that they're traumatizing people. It's like, hey, when you show up covered in blood and no eyes, that freaks us out. That scares us. Um, or it's like, hey, when you grab me or when you tap me on the shoulder, this scares me. Please don't do that. So usually when that happens, if a moment of trauma happens, we try to set boundaries like immediately. We do set boundaries in the beginning of the investigation, but sometimes we do have to reinforce those boundaries, especially depending on um, the spirit. To bring back Gettysburg into the example, one of my more traumatizing experiences happened at the orphanage with an entity that I felt was Rosa Carmichael, the woman who was abusing the children. Um, I decided to go into the hole, which is where she was really torturing these kids. Um, and I went in there, and this was my early Zach Bagans, keeping an eye on my kitten to make sure she's not. What are you doing? What are you doing? Um, I was in my early years, so I was kind of doing the Zach Bagans thing, and I was like, "How dare you call yourself a caretaker of children? And you're a horrible person." Blah blah blah. I was in the pitch black in the hole. I felt this presence come right up to my face, and I could hear and feel this presence go. That scared the out of me. Not literally, but almost. And to the point where I had to tell my guide, like, I need to get out of here. I need to leave. Um, and that's happened a couple times with some of my team members. Or they'll get, and actually, same location, the orphanage in Gettysburg, the basement. One of my team members was starting to get images of traumatic moments in her past while we were in the basement. Um, After one of my team members invited Rosa to come talk to us, and I was like, "Why did you do that?" Um, but it affected my other investigators in a way that with one of them, she was yeah, like I said, she was getting images of some of the most traumatic moments of her life coming to her. And when that happened, I told her, "Hey, go upstairs, take a break." So I don't know if that answers your question. A lot of times it's just checking in and taking a break. Usually taking a break because sometimes moving forward while you're still traumatized and feeling things is not the best time to investigate, depending on your investigation method.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Any other questions? Comments?
Just thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for
And thank you
coming.
and thank you for the kitty.
No problem. Yeah, she's she's hanging out under my desk right now. It's kind of cute. Oh, how bad, she's 16 weeks, 17 weeks old this week. So,
Is that one
yeah.
of the little ones?
Yeah, we rehomed
Oh.
two of them. We rehomed
Yep.
two of them. Oh, good, Debbie. I'm so glad you liked it. Yeah, we rehomed two of them, and now we have a little. We kept one, so because I'm a sucker. Um, and plus, we didn't want to go through the trauma of rehoming the third one. It was hard to give up the other two. There was a lot of tears, but yeah, we got attached. I mean, it's gonna happen when you bottle feed little babies that are this big, and they do their little ear wiggles, and they're so cute. So, um, yeah. So let's see. Shameless plug here. This is the book about my experience with the spirit attachment that I had for 8 months. If you've seen the Haunted Hospitals episode, you saw the abridged version. This book kind of fills in all the gaps. The Hamptonville Hauntings. This is the book about the Trivia Clinic with Gwendolyn and the Musetta's Waltz video. Um, the Trivia Clinic is reported to be haunted by over 70 ghosts. The claim's not too far-fetched. There's a lot of different spirits there. This place seems to collect ghosts. And then this book is The Brave Mortal's Guide to Ghost Hunting. This is more of a ghost hunting 101 type of book. So if you're new to investigating or you're just looking for other methods, there's this book too. And then this is my latest, Women of the Paranormal, A Brief History. In this book, I highlight 38 women who made significant contributions to the paranormal field.
Woo!
Woo! Yeah. And then, yeah, so here's my contact info if you want to, get in touch. I mean, I think all of you are on my Facebook, so I'm easy to get a hold of. This is my team's information. We do have a couple of videos on my team's YouTube channel. Trying to move forward. There we go. We are recruiting right now, nationwide, not just in Central North Carolina and Northern Virginia. If you if you applied, we are getting there for interviews. Spooky season was way too busy for me, so I wasn't able to interview as much as I wanted, much to my assistant director's annoyance. He was like, "Can you do this night? Can you do this night?" I'm like, "I got stuff." But we're going to start interviewing fairly more aggressively. So if you submitted an application, and we're going to be in touch. And we're also taking cases, and we're also available for consultations and advice. So if there's anything that you're like, "Hey, I think I got something weird going on in my house. Can we chat?" Sure. "Oh, Debbie, I hope you enjoy Women of the Paranormal." And then for my academics, here are my sources with some of the studies that I brought up. So I'll leave this up if you want to take a screenshot. Yeah, so these are my sources for the research that I did to basically support my claim, my claims here. And yeah, thank you all so much for joining me this evening. Um, I'll keep the room open for about another 30 minutes. I'm also going to stop the recording. So those of you joining us on YouTube, this is where your journey ends. Thank you for watching.